Tepid? Rage coiled in Clara's gut. Diamonds flashed, a bored voice complained, and another $80 risotto was headed for the trash. 16 hours on her feet, a sister's bills bleeding her dry. This waste felt criminal. Mr. Davies, that starched shirt of a manager, wouldn't care. But tonight, something snapped. She saw the defeated man in the corner, the untouched filet in the kitchen. A reckless idea bloomed. A risk. So what? Let them watch on the security cam. Compassion outweighed policy. Little did Croft Hospitality know, this act of defiance, this quiet kindness, was about to expose the rot at the very top. Tepid? Rage coiled in Clara's gut. Diamonds flashed, a bored voice complained, and another $80 risotto was headed for the trash. 16 hours on her feet, a sister's bills bleeding her dry. This waste felt criminal. Mr. Davies, that starched shirt of a manager, wouldn't care. But tonight, something snapped. She saw the defeated man in the corner, the untouched filet in the kitchen. A reckless idea bloomed. A risk. So what? Let them watch on the security cam. Compassion outweighed policy. Little did Croft Hospitality know, this act of defiance, this quiet kindness, was about to expose the rot at the very top. The Gilded Spoon, flagship restaurant of Croft Hospitality, was more than a mere dining establishment. It was a meticulously crafted illusion. Clara Evans was one of its key players, expertly portraying the unflappable, ever-smiling waitress. Each night, she navigated a theater of polished mahogany, gleaming silverware, and the heavy, perfumed air of truffle oil and exorbitant wealth. This Tuesday, the restaurant pulsed with a particular brand of predatory energy. 16 hours into her double shift, Clara's forced smile threatened to crack her skin. Her feet screamed in protest with every practiced step. "Excuse me, miss." The snap of fingers, sharp as a whip, cut through the clatter of the kitchen and the low hum of privileged conversation. At table 7, a woman adorned with enough diamonds to rival a small constellation glared at her risotto. Clara's practiced smile clicked back into place. "Yes, madam. Is everything to your liking?" "The risotto," the woman drawled, prodding the creamy rice with her fork as though inspecting something unpleasant. "It's tepid." Tepid? Impossible. Chef Antoine, a culinary artist with the temperament of a rabid badger, had personally presented that dish mere minutes ago. The heat should have been enough to singe the roof of her mouth, but the Gilded Spoon operated under a single unwavering principle. The customer was not merely right. They were infallible. "I am so deeply sorry to hear that, madam," Clara recited, the words rolling off her tongue with practiced ease. "I will have the kitchen prepare a fresh risotto immediately." The woman waved a dismissive hand, her diamonds catching the light. "Don't bother. My appetite is ruined. Just take it off the bill." "Of course, madam," Clara replied, her voice a perfect blend of apology and subservience. She collected the plate, the fragrant steam rising from the abandoned risotto. Another perfectly good $80 dish destined for the garbage. As she navigated the dining room, the weight of the uneaten meal felt heavier than usual. Each step was a reminder of her own precarious existence. The rent on her cramped 2-bedroom apartment was weeks overdue. The latest bill from Lily's specialist lay accusingly on the kitchen counter, a figure that could swallow her whole. Lily, her younger sister, was fighting a losing battle against a rare autoimmune disease. The life-saving medication she needed cost more each month than Clara earned in 3. So she worked relentlessly, sacrificing sleep and sanity for a chance at keeping Lily afloat. She willingly accepted every extra shift that Mr. Davies, the manager, offered. He was a man who seemed to have been born in a starched shirt and a perpetual sneer. He patrolled the dining room like a prison warden, his eyes missing nothing, from a smudge on a wine glass to a waitress's waning enthusiasm. His mantra, repeated ad nauseum at every staff meeting, was the sacred protection of company assets. That included everything from the embossed napkins to uneaten appetizers. Company policy was brutally clear. All leftover food, regardless of its origin or condition, was to be disposed of in the sealed organic waste bins. No exceptions. Taking food was grounds for immediate termination, and, as Davies frequently threatened with relish, potential legal action for theft. Scraping the still steaming risotto into the bin, under the watchful gaze of the kitchen porter, felt like a betrayal. The waste gnawed at her, the unapologetic, obscene waste. Each night, they discarded enough food to feed a family for a week, food that was vastly superior to the paltry meals she and Lily could afford. Her shift was scheduled to end at 11 p.m. At 10:45, a man walked in, disrupting the carefully curated atmosphere. He was out of place, a smudge of charcoal on a pristine canvas. His coat was frayed, his hair damp and disheveled from the evening drizzle. His face bore the map of hardship, etched with a weariness that resonated deep within Clara. He looked not just poor, but defeated. Tiffany, the hostess, a perpetually bored college student, barely glanced at him before declaring the kitchen closed. A blatant lie. They accepted orders until 11:30. "We have a bar menu available," Tiffany offered, her tone suggesting even that was beyond his means. The man simply nodded and retreated to the smallest, most isolated table in the corner, a two-top usually reserved for overflow. Clara watched as other waitresses actively avoided eye contact. He wasn't a generous tipper kind of customer. He was a tap water and a shared appetizer kind of customer. A waste of their time. Clara sighed, her feet throbbing in her worn-out shoes. She picked up a menu and a glass of water. Her conscience refused to let him sit there, ignored and judged. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon," she said, her voice softer than it had been all night. "My name is Clara. Can I get you started with something to drink?" The man looked up, and for the first time she saw his eyes. They were a startlingly clear, intelligent blue, and they held an unnerving intensity. He quickly looked away. "Just water is fine, thank you," he rasped, his voice rough. He scanned the menu, his expression unreadable. He looked like he hadn't had a proper meal in a long time, but a strange dignity clung to him, a stillness that contrasted sharply with his appearance. "Take your time," Clara said, offering a genuine smile. For the next hour, he became her final table. He ordered the cheapest item on the menu, a bowl of potato leek soup, and nursed it for nearly 45 minutes. She refilled his water glass 3 times without him having to ask. She didn't rush him. She treated him with the same quiet courtesy she would have extended to the mayor or a visiting celebrity. She treated him like a human being, and all the while she felt his eyes on her, a silent, heavy observation that she couldn't quite decipher. The clock ticked past midnight. The last of the chattering diners had drifted out, leaving behind a trail of half-empty wine glasses and crumpled linen napkins. The staff moved with the exhausted precision of closing time. The clatter of stacked plates replaced the murmur of conversation. Mr. Davies, invigorated by the prospect of a spotless closure, was in his element, barking orders. "Evans, table 4 needs to be reset for the morning. Peterson, get that spillage by the bar. I want this floor clean enough to eat off of, people. The Croft Regional Director is in town. We need to be perfect." Just then, chaos erupted from the kitchen. Chef Antoine's voice, a mix of French and furious English, echoed through the restaurant. Chloe, a new waitress, emerged, her face pale and streaked with tears. "He said I punched in the wrong order. Table 9 wanted the sea bass, but I wrote down the filet mignon. They sent it back. He's going to kill me." Mr. Davies descended upon her like a hawk. "You did what? Do you know how much a 9-ounce filet costs us, Chloe? That's $120 on the menu. Incompetent." Clara saw the untouched filet mignon on the pass-through window, perfectly cooked medium rare, resting next to a mound of garlic mashed potatoes and asparagus spears, drizzled with hollandaise. The customer hadn't even let the plate touch his table. "Throw it out," Davies snapped at a nearby busboy. "And Chloe, this is coming out of your paycheck." The girl choked back a sob. Clara knew the threat was illegal, but Chloe was too young and too terrified to challenge it. A surge of anger washed over Clara. She looked at the plate, a meal that cost more than she earned in an entire day of grueling work. Then her gaze drifted to the man in the corner, the man who had only ordered a bowl of soup. A reckless idea sparked, a clear violation of the employee handbook, something that Davies would fire her for on the spot. But the image of Lily, pale and weak in her bed that morning, flashed in her mind. Lily hadn't had much appetite for the canned soup and crackers Clara Ara had left for her. The sight of that steak, the thought of its impending waste, collided with the reality of her life, and something inside her shifted. It wasn't just about the man in the corner anymore. It was a small act of rebellion against a world that felt so profoundly, cruelly unfair. She waited. She waited until Mr. Davies was distracted, berating Chloe in his office. She waited until the busboy was busy in the back. Then, heart-pounding, she walked to the pass-through. Her hands moved quickly, her waitress skills kicking into autopilot. She grabbed a large black takeaway box, the kind used for VIP takeout orders. With practiced efficiency, she slid the entire meal into the container. The steak, the potatoes, the asparagus. It was still warm. She tucked a plastic fork and knife wrapped in a fresh linen napkin inside. Holding the box low by her side, shielding it from the security camera in the corner, she walked out of the kitchen. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to put it back, to throw it in the trash like she was supposed to. This job, this soul-crushing, exhausting job, was the only thing keeping her and Lily from drowning. But she kept walking. She approached the quiet man's table. He looked up, his blue eyes questioning. He had placed a $10 bill on the table for his $8 soup. "Your check, sir," she said, placing the bill folder on the table. Then she lowered her voice to a whisper. "And this?" She placed the heavy takeaway box on the chair beside him, keeping it below table level. He looked from her to the box, a frown creasing his brow. "What is this?" "The kitchen made an error," she whispered, her words rushing out. "It's a filet mignon. It was going to be thrown away. I hate seeing good food go to waste. Please just take it. Don't say anything." The man's expression was unreadable. He didn't look grateful or relieved. He looked analytical. He stared at her, his gaze so intense it felt like he was peering directly into her soul, weighing and measuring every word, every flicker of her expression. The silence stretched, becoming unbearable. Clara Ara was certain he would refuse or, worse, call the manager and expose her. Finally, he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't smile. He just picked up the box, the weight of it seeming to surprise him. He stood, his tall frame unfolding from the small chair. He was taller than she had realized. He paused beside her, so close she could feel a strange, cold energy radiating from him. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Clara," she said, her own voice barely audible. He nodded again, a short, sharp movement. "Clara," he said, as if memorizing it, filing it away for some future purpose. Without another word, he walked out of the restaurant and disappeared into the rainy night. Clara Ara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had done it. She had broken the biggest rule. She glanced at the security camera, a small black dome in the ceiling, and a cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She had gotten away with it, or so she thought. The blissful oblivion of sleep lasted only 4 hours. Clara Ara was jolted awake, not by her alarm clock, but by the relentless pounding headache that was the price of dehydration and 16 hours on her feet. The gray morning light filtering through her thin curtains revealed the grim reality of her apartment. The stack of bills on the counter, the faint scent of antiseptic from Lily's nebulizer, the threadbare sofa where she often fell asleep, too tired to make it to her own bed. Lily was still sleeping, her breathing soft and shallow in the next room. Clara Ara tiptoed to her sister's doorway and watched her for a moment. Lily's face, so youthful even at 17, was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes. A fierce, protective love washed over Clara, momentarily eclipsing her own exhaustion. This was why she did it. This was why she endured Davies, the rude customers, the aching feet. Every double shift was another vial of medication. Another day Lily could feel a little bit better. She started her morning ritual on autopilot, put on the kettle for tea, check her bank account on her phone, a depressing exercise, and mentally prepare herself for another day. She was pulling on her uniform for her 10 a.m. shift when the knock came. It wasn't a tentative tap. It was a firm, authoritative rap on the wood that vibrated through the flimsy door. Thump, thump, Thump. Her heart leaped into her throat. The landlord. It had to be. She was going to have to beg, to plead for one more week. Taking a deep breath, she plastered on a strained smile and opened the door. The man standing in the hallway was not her balding, pot-bellied landlord. He was tall, thin, and severe, with silver hair combed back from a high forehead and eyes like chips of flint behind wire-rimmed glasses. His suit was a charcoal gray masterpiece of tailoring, and the briefcase in his left hand was made of rich, dark leather. He looked utterly, terrifyingly out of place in the peeling hallway of her rundown apartment building. "Clara Ara Evans?" he asked, his voice clipped, precise and devoid of any warmth. "Yes," she stammered, her mind fumbling for an explanation. Was he from a collection agency? Had the hospital sent someone in person? "My name is Arthur Vance," he said, extending a business card. "I am the chief counsel for the Croft Hospitality Group." Clara Ara's blood ran cold. The Croft Group. Davies, the security camera, the stake. The words on the card seemed to blur before her eyes. Arthur Vance, chief legal officer. This was so much worse than the landlord. I don't understand," she said, her voice a weak whisper. "I think you do, Ms. Evans," Vance said coolly. He didn't raise his voice, but there was an unmistakable menace in his calm. "I'm here regarding an incident that took place at the Gilded Spoon last night, specifically at approximately 12:15 a.m. Journey between worlds. They left behind the cracked pavement and graffiti-tagged walls of her neighborhood and glided into the steel and glass canyons of the financial district. Each block brought them closer to the heart of the power that was about to crush her. Finally, the car slowed and pulled up in front of a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. Etched in discreet, elegant letters above the towering glass doors were the words Croft Tower. This was the global headquarters, the nerve center of Julian Croft's empire. The driver led her through the lobby, a cavernous space of white marble and modern art. The air hummed with quiet, purposeful energy. Men and women in exquisitely tailored suits moved with an air of brisk importance. Their conversations a low murmur of billion-dollar deals and corporate strategy. Clara Ara, in her 5-year-old slacks, felt like a ghost, completely invisible and utterly out of place. They didn't stop at the main elevator bank. The driver led her to a private, unmarked door that opened with a key card. Inside was a single express elevator. He pressed the top button marked with a simple P for penthouse. The elevator ascended in unnerving silence, the numbers climbing at a dizzying speed. 10, 20, 40, 60, 75. Her ears popped with a soft chime. The doors slid open not into a hallway, but directly into an office. Or rather, what passed for an office. It was a space larger than her entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides offering a breathtaking, godlike view of the entire city. The furniture was sparse and modern, a massive desk of polished black stone, a low-slung leather sofa, and shelves filled with what looked like museum-quality artifacts. It was the office of a king surveying his kingdom. And standing by the window, his back to her, was a man. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly fitted dark navy suit that bespoke immense wealth and power. He was staring down at the city below, his hands clasped behind his back. Arthur Vance, the lawyer, stood discreetly by the desk. "Ms. Evans is here, sir." The man by the window turned around slowly, and Clara Ara's breath caught in her chest. The world tilted on its axis. The panic, the fear, the anxiety of the last 3 hours coalesced into a single sharp point of pure disbelieving shock. It was him. The hair was no longer damp and unkempt, but perfectly styled. The weary, defeated expression was gone, replaced by one of cold, calculating authority. The frayed coat had been swapped for a bespoke suit, but the face was the same. And the eyes were identical, those startlingly clear, intelligent blue eyes that had watched her so intently from a corner table. The man from the restaurant, the man she had given the steak to, the man she had pitied. He was Julian Croft. For a moment, the only sound in the vast office was the frantic drumming of Clara's own heart. The air seemed to crackle with the unspoken revelation. The disheveled down on his luck man was a costume. The entire encounter had been a charade. She hadn't been helping a stranger. She had been serving her own executioner in disguise. Julian Croft's face was an unreadable mask of stone. He took a step forward, his expensive shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. He stopped about 10 feet from her, his posture radiating an intimidating aura of absolute control. "Miss Evans," he said, and the voice was different. The rough, raspy quality was gone, replaced by a smooth, cultured baritone that dripped with command. "Thank you for coming," Clara Ara found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "I believe we've met," he said, a flicker of something, not humor, but a cold acknowledgement in his eyes, though under different circumstances. The confusion and fear that had plagued her all morning began to curdle into a hot, sickening feeling of betrayal. This wasn't just a corporate policy issue. This felt personal. He had set a trap and she had walked right into it. Why, she asked, the single word encompassing 1,000 questions. Why the disguise? Why the test? Why her? I make it a habit to understand my business from the ground up. "Miss Evans," he explained, his tone clinical, as if he were discussing a quarterly report. "From the boardroom to the scullery for the past month, I've been visiting my properties unannounced. I wanted to see the Croft Hospitality Group through the eyes of our customers, not through the filtered reports of my executives." He began to pace slowly, his hands now in his pockets. "I have been observing a disturbing trend. Shrinkage, inventory loss, theft. Small at first, but it adds up. A bottle of wine here, a case of prime beef there. It's a cancer, a rot. I came to the Gilded Spoon last night, looking for the source of that rot." He stopped and looked directly at her, his blue eyes pinning her in place. "And then I found you." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He hadn't seen an act of kindness. He had seen exactly what he was looking for: a thief. In his mind, she had been caught red-handed. She wasn't giving food to a homeless man. She was a thieving employee smuggling stolen goods out the back door to a waiting accomplice. The thought was so grotesquely wrong that a bubble of hysterical laughter almost escaped her. "You think I stole from you?" she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength from sheer indignation. "I don't think, Miss Evans." "I know," he countered, his voice hardening. "I have the video. I have the testimony of my own eyes. You took a prime asset, packaged it, and removed it from the premises in direct flagrant violation of company policy. You are the rot I was looking for." The sheer arrogance of the man was staggering. He sat in his glass tower, a world away from the reality of her life, and passed judgment like a god. All her fear, all her desperation suddenly ignited into white-hot anger. The anger of the powerless who have been pushed too far. "The rot," she repeated, her voice rising, shaking with a fury she hadn't known she possessed. "You want to talk about rot, Mr. Croft?" "Arthur." Vance took a half-step forward as if to intervene, but Julian Croft raised a hand to stop him. He seemed intrigued by her defiance. "Let me tell you about rot," Clara Ara continued, taking a step toward him, closing the distance. "Rot is an $80 plate of perfectly cooked risotto being scraped into a garbage can because a woman found it tepid. Rot is a terrified young waitress being threatened with having a $100 steak taken from her paycheck because she made a simple mistake. Rot is a policy that dictates that thousands of dollars of perfectly good food that could feed dozens of hungry people be thrown into a bin every single night, while the people cooking and serving it can barely afford to buy groceries." She was breathing heavily, her heart pounding with adrenaline. She had nothing left to lose. He had already fired her. He was already suing her. What more could he do? "That food was garbage, Mr. Croft. Your own manager ordered it thrown out. It was worthless. But I guess in your world, it's better for it to be garbage than for it to feed a man who looks like he needs it." Julian Croft's expression didn't change, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. He had expected tears begging excuses. He had not expected to be lectured on the morality of his own company policies. "The policies are in place to prevent theft," he stated coldly, "to prevent employees from manufacturing mistakes so they can get a free meal for themselves or their friends. It's a simple, necessary rule." "And you thought I was taking it for myself?" she asked, incredulous. "Did I look like I was celebrating? Did the man I gave it to look like my friend?" I saw a human being who looked hungry, and I saw a meal that was about to be wasted. And for 5 seconds, I chose to be a decent person instead of a good employee. And that is the rot you're so determined to cut out. Congratulations, Mr. Croft. You found it. I hope you're proud. She stood her ground, her chin held high, tears of anger and frustration stinging her eyes. She had laid the truth of her world at his feet, a stark, ugly contrast to the pristine perfection of his penthouse office. The silence that followed was absolute. She had said her piece. Now all she could do was wait for the hammer to fall. Julian Croft stared at her, and for the first time, his mask of cold authority seemed to crack. He wasn't looking at a thief anymore. He was looking at something else, something he hadn't anticipated and didn't quite understand. The defiant, desperate woman in front of him did not fit into the neat little box of dishonest employee he had put her in, and her raw, blistering honesty had just shattered the very foundation of his assumptions. Julian Croft was a man who traded in certainties. His empire was built on data, on predictable market trends, on the black and white logic of profit and loss. He understood balance sheets, not bleeding hearts. For the past decade, a creeping cynicism had taken root in him. He'd been cheated by partners, lied to by executives, and stolen from by employees. He had come to believe that given the opportunity, most people would choose self-interest over integrity. Clara Ara Evans was supposed to be the proof, the final confirmation of his worldview, but she wasn't. Her impassioned speech echoed in the silent office. It wasn't a denial or an excuse. It was an indictment of him, his company, his entire world. He had come looking for a simple problem theft, and she had presented him with a complex moral one that he couldn't easily dismiss. He turned away from her and walked back to the window, looking down at the city. The cars below were like insects, the people insignificant specks. It was a view that usually made him feel powerful. Today it made him feel disconnected. "Why did you do it, Miss Evans?" he asked, his back still to her. His voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier accusatory edge. "It wasn't just about the waste. I saw your face. You risked your job, a job I can only assume you need." "Why?" "For a complete stranger." Clara Ara's anger began to subside, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. The adrenaline was gone, leaving her feeling hollowed out. "Because I know what it's like to be hungry," she said. "Simply the truth of it, raw and unadorned. I know what it's like to have to choose between paying the rent and buying medicine. And I know that sometimes a small kindness from a stranger is the only thing that gets you through the day." This was the part she hadn't wanted to say, the part that felt like weakness, like begging for pity. But he had asked, and the truth was all she had left. "I have a sister," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Lily, she's sick. She has been for years. The medications, the doctors. It's a mountain of debt that I can never seem to climb. That job at your restaurant, those double shifts, that was the only thing keeping a roof over our heads. It was the only thing paying for the medicine that keeps my sister alive. So yes, I needed that job. I needed it more than you can possibly imagine." She swiped at a tear trailing down her cheek. "But when I saw you, when I saw that man sitting there looking so lost, and I saw that perfectly good food about to be thrown away, I thought about what that meal would mean to someone who had nothing. It was more than food. It was a little bit of dignity, a sign that someone sees them. I guess I just decided that Lily would want me to choose kindness, even if it was stupid, even if it meant risking everything." Julian remained silent, his posture rigid. Every word she spoke was a chisel chipping away at the cynical armor he had built around himself. He had spent his life accumulating wealth and power, insulating himself from the very struggles she described. He had created policies designed to protect his assets, never once considering the human cost of such rigid, unfilling rules. His undercover mission was predicated on the idea that his employees were the problem. He was beginning to realize that the problem might be him. He thought of his own sister, Catherine, who had died years ago. He had been a young man just starting his first company. He'd been so obsessed with success, so driven that he had missed her last few months, always promising to visit next week, next month. He had all the money in the world now, but he couldn't buy back that time, Clara Ara's fierce devotion to her sister was a painful echo of his own failing. Finally, he turned to face her. The coldness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a complex, troubled expression. "Arthur," he said, his voice low. "Sir," the lawyer responded, "the background check I requested on Miss Evans this morning." The summary. Arthur Vance hesitated for a fraction of a second, then opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Clara Ara Evans, age 26. He read in a neutral monotone. Sole legal guardian of her sister, Lily Evans, age 17. Lily was diagnosed 3 years ago with systemic lupus erythematosus with severe renal involvement. Current outstanding medical debt is approximately $112,000. Miss Evans works an average of 65 hours per week. She has no criminal record, no prior history of disciplinary action at any place of employment. Her performance reviews at the Gilded Spoon have been consistently rated as excellent. The clinical facts confirmed everything Clara had said. She wasn't a liar. She wasn't a thief. She was a desperate woman pushed to the edge who even then chose to help someone else. Julian Croft looked at Clara, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as an employee, not as a suspect, but as a person of extraordinary character, forged in the fires of hardship. He had set out to find the worst in his company and had by complete accident found the very best. The rot he'd been so concerned about wasn't in his staff. It was in the corporate culture. He had created a culture that had lost its humanity. Arthur Julian set his voice firm with a newfound clarity. Tear up the termination notice and shred that civil complaint immediately. Arthur Vance looked surprised, but a small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He took the documents, tore them precisely in half, and then in half again, dropping the pieces into a nearby wastebasket. Clara Ara watched, stunned into silence. The lawsuit, the firing, it was all just gone, Miss Evans, Julian said. And her name sounded different now. It sounded like a name he respected. "I owe you an apology. My judgment was flawed. I was wrong. I was so focused on finding dishonesty that I failed to recognize integrity when it was staring me right in the face." The apology was simple, direct, and utterly sincere. It was the last thing Clara Ara had ever expected to hear. "What you did last night," he continued, "was not a fireable offense. In fact, it has highlighted a profound failure within my own organization, a failure of compassion." He walked to his desk and leaned against it, the picture of a man whose entire perspective had been forcibly shifted. "I'm not giving you your job back, Clara Ara," he said. Clara Ara's heart sank. For a moment, she had dared to hope. "I'm offering you a new one," he finished, and the world tilted once more. Clara Ara stared at him, unable to process his words. A new job. After everything that had just happened, it felt like a dream, a strange, surreal twist in a day that had already been full of them. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Julian Croft gestured to the chair in front of his desk. For the first time, he was inviting her to sit. Tentatively, she did, perching on the edge of the expensive leather. For years, Julian began his voice thoughtful. "The Croft Foundation, my company's charitable arm, has been writing checks. We donate to hospitals, to arts programs, to disaster relief. It's good pay, and it helps with taxes. But it's impersonal. It's sterile. It lacks a soul." He looked at her, his blue eyes holding a new kind of intensity, not of suspicion, but of vision. "You talked about waste, Clara Ara, and you were right. My restaurants and hotels throw away metric tons of high-quality food every year across the country. We've always written it off as the cost of doing business, but it's not. It's a moral failure. And you, with your one box of leftover steak, you saw that more clearly than my entire board of directors." He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the black stone desk. "I want to create a new initiative within the Croft Foundation, a program with a single clear mission to ensure that no usable food from any of my properties is ever thrown away again. I want it collected, packaged, and delivered to homeless shelters, food banks, and community centers in every city where we operate. I want to turn our single biggest source of waste into our single biggest source of charged charity." He paused, letting the weight of the idea settle in the room. "But a program like that needs a leader. It needs someone who doesn't just understand logistics, but who understands the why. It needs someone with integrity, grit, and a deep innate sense of compassion. Someone who knows what it means to choose kindness even when it's the harder choice. He looked directly at her. It needs you, Clara Ara. I want you to run it. Clara Ara was speechless. Her mind reeled him the billionaire CEO offering her the fired waitress and executive position. It was impossible. May Mr. Kraft, I don't have a college degree. I don't have any corporate experience. I'm a waitress. You have a PhD in humanity, Miss Evans, which is a great deal more valuable for this role than an MBA, he countered swiftly. We can hire people for the logistics. I need you for the heart. I'll give you an office here in this building. I'll give you a team. I'll give you a budget that will make your head spin, and I'll give you a salary that ensures you never have to worry about your sister's medical bills ever again. As if on cue, Arthur Vance spoke up from his position by the door. On that note, Mr. Croft also instructed me to make arrangements with the Foundation's medical fund. All of Lily's current and future medical expenses will be covered in full. The breath left Clara's body in a rush. The weight she had been carrying on her shoulders for years, the crushing, suffocating mountain of debt and fear, simply evaporated. Tears streamed down her face now, but they were not tears of anger or sadness. They were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible relief. The fight was over. Lily was safe. Why? She finally managed to ask, looking at Julian Croft. Why do all this for me? Julian's gaze drifted back to the window, to the sprawling city below. Because you reminded me of something I had long forgotten, he said, his voice quiet and sincere. That the true value of a company isn't measured by its stock price, but by its impact on people's lives. You didn't just save a meal from being wasted last night, Clara. In a way, you saved me from my own cynicism. That's a debt worth repaying. A few months later, the view from the 70th floor of the Croft Tower was becoming familiar to Clara. She had her own office, smaller than Julian's, but with the same stunning view. Her desk was covered in spreadsheets and proposals for what they were now calling the Second Serving Initiative. She wore a sharp business suit, a gift from Julian, and spoke with a confidence that grew stronger each day. The program was a stunning success. In its first 3 months, it had redirected over 50 tons of food to those in need. News outlets had picked up the story, hailing the Croft Hospitality Group for its revolutionary approach to corporate responsibility. Mr. Davies, the sneering manager from the Gilded Spoon, had been reassigned to a remote hotel in Alaska after an internal review found his management style to be incompatible with the company's new compassionate ethos. Best of all, Lily was thriving with access to the best doctors and treatments without the stress of financial worry. The color had returned to her cheeks. She was even taking online college courses, dreaming of a future that had once seemed impossible. One evening, Clara was working late when Julian knocked on her open door. He wasn't her boss anymore. Not really. He had become a mentor, a partner, and surprisingly, a friend. Still here? He asked with a small smile. Just finalizing the rollout for the Chicago branch, she said, leaning back in her chair. You've done incredible work, Clara, more than I ever could have imagined. I had a good reason to, she said, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on her desk. It was of her and a smiling, healthy-looking Lily. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. Two people from two vastly different worlds, brought together by a plate of food and a simple act of kindness. Clara thought back to that rainy night, to the fear and desperation she had felt. It was proof that you never know what a single moment of compassion can lead to, or whose life you might change. It could be the person you are helping, or as Julian Croft had learned, it could be your own. Clara's story is a powerful reminder that our true character isn't defined by the job we have or the money in our bank account, but by the choices we make when no one is watching or when we think no one is watching. It shows that a single act of kindness, no matter how small or risky it seems, can create ripples that change not just one life, but the very culture of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It's a testament to the idea that integrity and empathy are the most valuable assets any person can possess, far more precious than anything you can list on a balance sheet. Her journey from a struggling waitress to a force for positive change proves that the right action, driven by the right intentions, can open doors you never dreamed existed. If Clara Ara's incredible story of compassion and unexpected triumph moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is never ever wasted. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story about ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. What did you think of Julian Croft's final decision? Let us know in the comments below.